So I'm gonna break down every single Buffy comic and the order you need to read them in, just because I feel like it's a helpful resource if Buffy comics is something that you care about. So you're gonna start off with the Dark Horse Classic Buffy series, and there's several ways to collect these. The first way is the single issues. This is kind of what they look like. There's 63 Buffy ones, and then there's a handful of like one-shots and crossovers, and there's 17 Angel issues. You can collect the same stories in trade paperbacks that look like these. So they look like, but the most popular way to collect these stories is either through the Omnibus series or the Legacy Edition series. So I'm gonna start with the omnibuses. So there's 7 of these books plus one Angel one. Oh God, it's heavy. That will cover almost everything, and it presents all these stories in chronological order, meaning the order that would appear in the TV series. On the other hand, the Boom Legacy editions present almost all the same stories, but in publication order. I do think that both are very fun ways to read the comics. However, the Legacy edition is not exhaustive. It doesn't have everything. So I'm gonna read out what each book is missing so you can supplement it with either, the single issues or the trade paperbacks. Book 1 is missing The Dust Waltz, The Origin, and Paint the Town Red, which is the first comic that was written by James Marsters. Book 2 is missing Queen of Hearts. Book 3 is missing Ring of Fire, Giles Beyond the Pale, All's Fair, and Jonathan: codename: Comrades. Book 6 is missing One a Blessed Bee and the Oz storyline. Book 5 is missing Lost and Found, Reunion, and Wilderness Part 1 and Part 2. And finally, book 6 is just missing Chaos Bleeds. That you can find that as a single issue. It's also an unlockable feature if you have the Chaos Bleeds video game, and not to be confused with the Chaos Bleeds tie-in novel, which I believe is a novelization of the video game. Hopefully that makes sense. So the Legacy series also separates the Angel comics into 2 separate volumes. The most significant difference is that volume 2 features a comic that is not available anywhere else. So it's super short. Sometimes it's called Angel, sometimes it's just called Untitled, but it's been out of print for 2 decades, and you can only get it in this copy. Really quick, I should also note that the Dark Horse Classic Buffy series is not canon, so you don't technically have to read it unless you want to stay within that season 1 to season 4 space. Another significant difference between the Omnibus and the Legacy series is the way that the final cut is presented. So the final cut was one of the single issues in the Dark Horse Classic series, but they later republished it in a Supernatural Defense kit, and when they republished it in this, they included extra pages. I think it's so cool that all the holy water evaporated from these bottles. I think it's really cute. I think it's cute that it's gone forever. But anyway, if you want to read it in its original form, it's in book 1 of the Legacy series. And if you want to read it with the extra pages included, you can read it in this defense kit or in book 3 of the Omnibus series. One thing that is missing from both of these versions is a short illustrated story that, as far as I know, can only be found in issue 50. So this is issue 50, and in the back there is a short story where Buffy tells Dawn about her first time slaying a vampire. So this short story, as far as I know, is only found in this single issue. It might be included in Note from the Underground, the trade paperback, but because I don't have that copy, I can't verify that. But it is not included in either the Omnibus books or the Legacy Edition books. So I would say if you're interested in it, you have to hunt down a copy of issue 50. Now, before we move on to the IDW series, Tokyo Pop did release one Buffy publication. It is a graphic novelization of the Gift episode using just screenshots from the show. It's kind of fun because it'll include like stage direction from the script or some of the cut dialogue. So it's interesting, but it's not necessary. But now we're gonna move on to the IDW series. These were just focused on what Angel and Spike were up to be honest. Buffy doesn't show up at all, but it is still necessary to read these to understand some of the stuff that happens later in Buffy season 8. So there are 2 Angel IDW omnibuses. Meanwhile, look how emo he looks in this, it's ridiculous. Volume 1 collects The Curse, Old Friends, Spotlight, and Auld Lang Syne. These are also available as 4 separate trade paperbacks, and I'm going to spare you some grief. So each of these trade paperbacks is going to be numbered volume 1 through 4. So don't be like me and pick up Spotlight, see number 3 on the spine, and think that you have to hunt down a volume 1 and volume 2 of Spotlight. That's not what's happening here. It took me a while to figure out the numbering system. The second IDW omnibus features Smile Time, which I'm going to get into a little bit more later, A Hole in the World, Barbary Coast, Only Human, and Not Fade Away. Now, these are available as 5 separate trade paperbacks, and those are not numbered on the spine because they realized that they were confusing Marissa. Now, speaking of Smile Time, there is a Smile Time hardcover, and this features the stories Smile Time, Mystery Date, Once More with Felt, Plush, Two to Sew, and Doppelgang Bang. Title that I hate. Now there are 3 more stories that aren't included in this Smile Time hardcover, but they are included in the Masks single issue. So this features Mystery Date, which is also in this, but also includes 3 more stories that aren't necessarily tied in with the Smile Time storyline, but they can only be found in this Masks single issue. So those include Unacceptable Losses, Foreshadowing, and Pencils and Paper Clips. Pencils and Paper Clips is interesting because it's about how Lindsay and Eve first met. And again, so those 3 stories can only be found in this single issue. Now it's time for the Spike Omnibus. This can also be collected in a handful of trade paperbacks. So this is the same as Spike, Spike vs. Dracula, Asylum, and Shadow Puppets. I do have a copy of the Shadow Puppets trade paperback, and this one is really interesting because it has writer's commentary on the back, and I think that's super neato. Look how adorable he is. Yeah, I like Shadow Puppets so much that I made my own Spike puppet. Anyway, going back to Asylum, this story is necessary in order to understand some parts of the After the Fall storyline, which is coming up, and that story is canon, so recommend reading Asylum. There are a few other publications during this time that I don't have copies of, so I have limited knowledge of what occurs in those stories. One of them is called Fallen Angel Reborn. It's a crossover between Angel and Fallen Angel, and I believe it's about Illyria who's trying to chase down some magical objects. The other publication around this time is called Angel Blood and Trenches, and that's about what Angel was doing during World War II. That collection is also in the John Byrne collection, which I cannot afford, and that book also features Angel versus Frankenstein. It's the only place where you can collect that story. So yeah, I guess I'll never know who wins between those 2. Could be Angel, could be Frankenstein. So now it's time for Spike Into the Light. This comic was written by James Marsters based on his pitch for what the Spike movie would have looked like. So it's essentially about, Spike is on a search for a new pair of boots. And during this time, he shares a romantic connection with a character named Dylan, who was based on his then partner, Jasmine Marsters. Now, this is controversial with some fans, purely based on the setting it takes place in. This takes place between season 6 and season 7, right after he's gotten his soul for Buffy. So it kind of doesn't make sense that he shares this romantic connection with someone else, but other than that, it's fine. The other really interesting thing about this comic is the Chinese characters that are included. So there are very few Chinese characters in the TV show, the books, and the comics where they're either human / not evil, speak English, and don't die at the end. So this comic is great for that reason. The Chinese characters aren't killed off, they can speak English, and they're human. Now, tell me why the characters are dressed like this in the year 2002. Tell me why the married couple have 2 different last names, or possibly their last names are supposed to be their first names. I don't know, but they don't die. Spoiler warning. I would like to clarify that it's generally fine if the Chinese character can't speak English, but if it's consistent throughout a piece of media that none of the Chinese characters can speak English, or any of the Asian characters can speak English, then it kind of reinforces this myth of the perpetual foreigner, right? But that's neither here nor there. Time for the After the Fall series. When this first came out, I remember I really enjoyed it. And it is canon, so you have to read it. So you're gonna start with Volume 1, After the Fall, then Volume 2, After the Fall, First Night. Then you're gonna stop. Don't go to Volume 3 yet. You're gonna read Spike After the Fall next. And then if you want, you can read Lorne, Music of the Spheres. This isn't necessary to understand the rest of the plot line, but it is a lot of fun. It can only be found in this trade paperback or in that super expensive John Byrne collection that I mentioned earlier. It is fun to get it in this format because in the back there are letters from Mark Lutz, who plays Gru, and just, you know, photos of them on vacation together. Isn't that beautiful? So I do recommend getting a copy of this. Okay, then After the Fall, Volume 3, and After the Fall, Volume 4. Up next, you're gonna read Angel Aftermath, which is Volume 5 of the After the Fall series. Now, I'm gonna stop and talk about this for a little bit because people do not like this volume. Now, I think it's interesting for one reason, and that's because it's clearly referencing the film Cat People. Now, Cat People was a horror film that came out in the 1940s. It's one of the first instances of a jump scare in a horror film. It was later remade in the 80s. David Bowie did the soundtrack. And Malcolm McDowell's cat-like walk in that film influenced James Marsters' walk as Spike. So it's interesting for that reason. Other than that, you know, it is necessary in order to move forward. You can just skim through it. It's not the strongest out of all of them. Cool, so now we're on to Angel, Last Angel in Hell, which is Volume 6 of the After the Fall series. This one is really cool because one of the chapters is written by Juliet Landau, who plays Drusilla, and it's about Drusilla. One really cool thing is that if you get the single issues, at least issue number 25, there is a photo shoot of Juliet Landau taken by her husband, Dev. And that's really cool. It's not included in this, so I just thought I'd point that out. That pretty much wraps up the After the Fall series. You could also call that Angel Series 6. Alternatively, you could read these in Angel Volume 6, Volume 1, and Volume 2. That reorders the story in chronological order versus publication order. It does not include Lorne's story. It came out in like a slipcase and a premiere edition. I don't own those. I don't think they're necessary, but if you're a completist, they exist. Now on to Angel Season 7. So you're gonna start with Angel Immortality for Dummies. And you're gonna stop. Don't go to Volume 2 yet. You're gonna go to Spike, The Devil You Know, and then Volume 2, which is the Crown Prince Syndrome. And you're gonna stop. You're gonna read Illyria Haunted. And then you're gonna go to Volume 3, which is The Wolf, the Ram, and the Heart. I think I remember really disliking this one, but I can't really remember. And then you're gonna go on to Spike Alone Together Now and Spike Stranger Things. These two I thought were amazing, but the story was cut short, which I thought was a shame. I could have stayed in this world a lot longer. Now, these are necessary reading because something is going to happen in Buffy season 8, where if you haven't read these, you're going to be really confused. You're going to think, well, where did this thing come from? It came from these two. So read them. So after all of that, you can read Angel Yearbook. This isn't necessary, but it is really nice. This is basically IDW's goodbye to the Angel series. And they're very just like cute, short little stories. Now, if you want, you can also read Angel Season 7 through a collection. I think it's called Angel Season 7. And that just includes this plus these 3 volumes. So Immortality for Dummies, Crown Prince Syndrome, and Wolfram and the Heart. It doesn't include The Devil You Know or Illyria Haunted, so some parts might be a little bit confusing, but you can get through it if you want to read it that way. Okay, I think we're like a third of the way through, friends. Now you can read Frey. This is set in the future. Technically, you can read this anytime you want. Just read it before you start season 8. And that's all I'll say about that. Now, season 8. This is going to be the easiest season to find in comic book stores. I feel like they cannot give them away. So you can read it in 8 trade paperbacks like these. So it's The Long Way Home, No Future for You, Wolves at the Gate, Time of Your Life, Predators and Prey, Retreat, Twilight, and then Last Gleaming. You can also read these in 4 library editions if you want. Now, this season does get a lot of criticism because it is so plot heavy, and not all of it is good. But make your own judgments. Quick side note, they did make a motion comic of season 8, but this only covers up to issue 19 out of the 40 issues that make up season 8. So this is enjoyable, but you're not gonna get all of the story. This is cool because it comes with a little mini comic that is the perfect size if you wanna let a Smile Time puppet read it. All right, so season 9 is a little bit more complicated because the Buffy storyline and the Angel and Faith storylines run concurrently and they occasionally intersect. So you're gonna have to alternate back and forth between reading these storylines. So as a result of Buffy's encounter with the big bad at the end of season 8, the magic of the world has been affected. So season 9 is all about dealing with the fallout of that. So you can start with either, you could start with either the Buffy storyline or the Angel and Faith storyline. It doesn't really matter. For the sake of this argument, let's just say you start with Angel and Faith. Now, for some reason, don't get confused like me. For some reason, even though these are both first editions, the covers are different. I mean, the spine colors are different, and that's confusing. So double check to make sure you don't accidentally end up with 2 copies of the exact same thing. So let's start with Angel and Faith, live through this, and then read Buffy Freefall. You can start with either one, doesn't matter. Then you're gonna read Buffy on your own. I forgot to include it earlier because I lost my copy. Then you're gonna stop and you're gonna read Spike, A Dark Place. Then you're gonna go to Angel and Faith, Daddy Issues. Then you're gonna go back to Buffy and read Guarded. Then you're gonna read Angel and Faith, Family Reunion. And then you're gonna stop again. And you're gonna read Willow Wonderland. And you're gonna go back to Buffy, read Welcome to the Team, Angel and Faith, Death and Consequences. I shouldn't cover it. Angel and Faith, Death and Consequences, Buffy the Core, and then Angel and Faith, What You Want, Not What You Need. And that's season 9. You can also read these through the library editions. You would just need to alternate back and forth again. So you can start with Angel and Faith Library Edition Volume 1, Buffy Library Edition Volume 1, then Angel and Faith Volume 2, Buffy Volume 2, Angel and Faith Volume 3, and then Buffy Volume 3. And those will include the Spike and Willow storylines as well. All right, Buffy Season 10. Well, and Angel and Faith Season 10 as well. This point in my life, I was trying to get an education, so I wasn't reading Buffy comics. That was obviously a mistake. I should have been reading Buffy comics. But anyway, as a result, I only have a few of the issues. And they're very difficult to come by now. They're extremely expensive. So I would recommend trying to supplement this with the single issues, which are slightly easier to chase down. So you know how for Season 9 I say you could start with either Buffy or Angel and Faith? This season is a lot better if you start with Buffy. So you're going to do Buffy, New Rules, Angel and Faith, Where the River Meets the Sea, Buffy, I Wish, Angel and Faith, Lost and Found, and then the one I'm missing, Buffy, Love Dares You, Angel and Faith, United, Buffy, Old Demons, Angel and Faith, A Little More Than Kin, Buffy, In Pieces on the Ground, Angel and Faith, A Tale of Two Families, and then Buffy, Own It. You can also read just the Buffy side through 3 hardcover library editions. Angel and Faith Season 10 was not released in library editions. You can only get them through the trade paperbacks. So Buffy Season 10 I really enjoyed. Buffy Season 11 I think is also really strong, but it's also really short. So there's only 3 volumes in the series. So the first one is Buffy, The Spread of Their Evil. Now again, these issues are very hard to come by now and very expensive. So I've settled for damaged copies that the library was selling. You can also try to chase the season down through single issues, which might be slightly cheaper. So read this one, and then technically you're supposed to jump to Giles Girl Blue. However, I don't think that's necessary. I think you can go straight into Buffy, One Girl Know the World, and then come back to this if you want. I'm personally not a huge fan of this because there's some characterizations of Giles that I'm not a fan of. But again, that's just what I think. Thinking is free. You can think whatever you want. There is a library edition of Season 11 as well. Again, outrageously expensive. I think you should only pursue it if you're trying to collect all the library editions. Angel Season 11. I was able to get the library edition out because it was only $13. And that's because Angel Season 11 is not very good. This is what it looks like. Now there are some storylines about Illyria that I find interesting. Okay, well here's my beef with it, and this is gonna be a spoiler warning. So toward the end of Angel Season 11, totally disconnected from Buffy Season 11 by the way. At the end of this season, Fred is starting to reemerge from Illyria, and they share the same body, but they keep switching back and forth. For some reason, even though they had no chemistry in the past, Illyria and Angel start a sexual relationship. Now, Fred is able to recall these memories when she is in control of the body, and she doesn't want to do that with Angel, but she just comes to the conclusion that, hey, even though Illyria and I share the same body, there's nothing I can really do about it. I disagree. I think she could absolutely ask Angel, her champion, not to sleep with her body when she's unconscious, but greater minds than me are at work, obviously. But that's what you kind of need to know going into Season 12, is that Angel and Illyria are a couple now. We're supposed to have feelings about this in a way that Angel is not a bad guy in this scenario. That makes sense. So Buffy Season 12, the bad news is that it's not a really good season, but the good news is that it's only 4 issues. So yeah, this is what they look like. Issue 1, 2, 3, 4. There are alternate covers if you want to chase those down. Getting it in single issues is going to be 10 times cheaper than chasing down the trade paperback or the library edition. And then because it's only 4 issues, they padded out the library edition with Giles Girl Blue and the Free Comic Book Day issue from 2017. That's all you really need to know about Season 12. Cool. Now I'm going to dive into some of the publications during this era that aren't tied to any of the seasons. So first, I'm going to strongly recommend the Buffy Tales collection. This combines Tales of the Slayer and Tales of the Vampires. However, this does include 3 stories that aren't in either of those 2 publications. So that's Broken Bottle of Gin, The Thrill, and Carpe Noctem. So those 3 stories are only in this one. Now there is one story that's in here and in Tales of the Slayer, which is significant. That one is called Sun and Bloom. That is the first Buffy comic that is both written and illustrated by women. And that's not going to happen again until we get to Buffy the high school years. So written and illustrated by 2 women. This one is, what's this called? This is called Freaks and Geeks, Glutton for Punishment, and Parental Parasite. There's also the free comic book day issue that's included in the Buffy Volume 12 Library Edition. And these are just really lighthearted and fun. They're set during the first season, so it's a good read. 2 graphic novels that I would recommend if you're interested in keeping with that fun, lighthearted Buffy mood are The Cursed Coven and New School Nightmare. I think you should read New School Nightmare first and then Cursed Coven, actually. So these are set in an alternate universe where Buffy becomes a Slayer at age 12 and she moves to the Cleveland Hellmouth instead of Sunnydale. Okay, we're almost done. We're finally at the boom era of Buffy comics. Now, I don't know what other people think about this era, but I can imagine that because these are all set in alternate universes, people are going to have a problem with the fact that the characterizations of everyone are a little bit off from what we would expect from previous comics or from the TV show. I think the boom comics are fun. That being said, the reading order is a little bit confusing for me. You can get these 2 deluxe editions. So the first one is High School is Hell, and the other one is Hellmouth. It's hard for me to explain how, but both of these editions have the same issues, just that this one includes the Hellmouth storyline and this one doesn't. Now, if you're me and you're reading these comics for the first time, reading them this way is really confusing. But maybe you're smarter than me and this is fine. Now, because these were published, I think around 2020 or 2021, the binding is really bad. Like, pages are about to fall off. However, they do have really nice cover galleries. The artwork for the Boom comics is some of my favorite, to be quite honest. If you want to read it through the trade paperbacks, which is what I would recommend, this is what you're gonna do. First, you're gonna read Angel Volume 1, Being Human. Now you can either read this one first or Buffy Volume 1, High School is Hell, which I don't own. I think it doesn't matter which one you read first. Essentially, this one starts with Angel issue number 0, which is a prequel where he's just vaguely encouraged to go to the Hellmouth, and that technically takes place after Buffy issue number 4. But honestly, you can read either one first. After you read Buffy High School is Hell, you're going to read Once Bitten, which is volume 2, and also the only one where the name isn't on the spine, which is really annoying for me personally. Then you're gonna stop and you're gonna read Hellmouth. You can read it this way. There's also a gift set which will combine this and then this free comic book day issue. After that, you can read volume 3, Beneath You, and then you're gonna go back to Angel and you can read volume 2, City of Demons. Now before you go back to Buffy, you're gonna read Willow, and then you can go to Buffy volume 4, Frenemies. Next, you're gonna read Angel plus Spike volume 1. Now don't get confused, this is a continuation of the same storyline that's in Angel volume 1 and volume 2. They just changed the name to Angel plus Spike and start the numbering over again. I don't know why they did this, but don't get confused. It's the same storyline. So read this one next, and then you can read Buffy Volume 5, which is The Biggest Bad. After that, you're gonna return back to Angel plus Spike Volume 2. And Buffy Volume 6, Secrets of the Slayer. Volume 7, The World Without Shrimp. Volume 8, A Rainbow Upon Her Head. Volume 9, Forget Me Not. And then Volume 10, We Are the Slayer. So as you could probably already tell, this all takes place in an alternate universe, also known as The World Without Shrimp. Now I'm gonna dive into Buffy the Last Vampire Slayer. This is set in an alternate universe where Buffy is in her 50s and she believes herself to be the last vampire slayer. But she's wrong. She meets someone who is the actual last vampire slayer. And side note, this character keeps trying to like kill allies and everyone's just cool with it. So after you read this trade paperback, you're gonna either want to read the Last Vampire Slayer special as a single issue, or the Last Vampire Slayer The Lost Summers trade paperback. This trade paperback combines the special with the Lost Summers one-shot. The Lost Summers is not related to the Buffy Last Vampire Slayer plotline. This is set in its own universe. This is all about Buffy and her found family going on a road trip, which is my kind of thing. And this is genuinely like one of my favorite comics out of all the Buffy comics, but unrelated. So after you read either this or this, you're going to read the rest of the story through 5 single issues. So this is what they look like. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's variant covers, of course, but these were only released as single issues. They were never put in any other collection. They were never put in their own trade paperback. You can only get them as these single issues. So I can imagine that they're only gonna get more difficult to find. So I went ahead and I just got used copies from the library. Next, I absolutely recommend the Parallel Hell series. It's 2 volumes. The first one is Angel Parallel Hell. The second one is Angel City of Angelus. Now, it's hard to tell, but these 2 are connected to each other, and they're absolutely not connected to these 2 Angel comics. So entirely different universes. This is set in a parallel universe where Angel and Cordelia have their own TV show while also running Angel Investigations. So it's very creative. I do recommend it. And the only way you can tell that these 2 volumes are connected is that the front covers feature the Hollywood Boulevard sidewalk texture. This is the last series. It's called The Vampire Slayer, just The Vampire Slayer. This is set in an alternate universe, Universe 37. They gave it a number. And in this series, Willow has Slayer powers and Buffy doesn't, which brings its own set of dramas, but they kind of handle it in a bit of a goofy way sometimes. But there's only 4 volumes, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4. Super easy. Okay, these are the final publications from the Boom era Buffy comics. So there is Buffy 97. This includes some original stories plus some of the Dark Horse stories, including some that were written by Amber Benson, which is super fun. So this is extremely enjoyable. There is also The Chosen Ones. This is comparable to the Dark Horse Tales collection, wherein it's just stories about different Slayers throughout the years. This has the same cover as Every Generation and the same title as The Chosen Ones. Don't get confused, this combines both of those publications. Then there is the 25th anniversary and then the 25th Free Comic Book Day issue. These are fun to have on their own. However, you can get the same stories that are collected throughout different publications that I've already shared. If you have a copy of the Excel spreadsheet, this will break it down easier than I could explain it. Honestly, I've lost steam. I'm tired. I made this because I thought it would be easier to understand than the Excel spreadsheet that I made. but I might have made it even more confusing. Who knows? The end. Bye.